Now, if you've been here for any time, or if you're here for the first time, or maybe still new to the effect, I'm going to catch you up real fast. What we're all about is transformation. What we're all about is change, because that's what Jesus was about. Jesus wasn't trying to give us a religion that we could sit back passively and just watch take place before us, to believe creedally in something that was going to save us. He was trying to lead us into a way of life that was going to change us from the inside out. It's not that we're waiting for God to accept us. It's that we have to become ready to be able to apprehend the acceptance that is already here, the presence that is already here. And until we've done the work of salvation, it may sound strange to you, but that's the way Paul put it as well, we're not going to be able to see what's right in front of us. And so it's all about transformation. It's all about this fundamental change in us that can take place if we do what Jesus did. He told us that. The things that you see me do, you will do, if we can move through this. And so that change is central to what we're doing here. Without it, there's really no point to the religion. There's no point to the church. It's about ushering us into the presence of God that will change us from the inside out, and the awareness and the insight that comes with that process. So last night, for some of you were with us last night, we had our movie night. And our movie last night was The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which, yes, is a comedy, kind of I hate the word dramedy, but I suppose there's comedic elements and there's dramatic elements. But the whole point of the story of Walter Mitty is that it is a story of profound, fundamental personal change. It is a hero's journey in that respect. And so we talked about it a little bit last on Friday night, but we really didn't get into it. So I wanted to take some time here. If you haven't seen the movie, it's okay. I'm going to give you enough of it that I think all of this is going to be able to make sense to you. If you have seen the movie, or you just watched it with us Friday night, hopefully it's going to deepen that experience for you as well, because I want to bring in some elements here. The movie itself is based on a 1939 short story by James Thurber, who is one of America's primary humorists and satirists and cartoonists, kind of along the lines of a Will Rogers or even a Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. And he wrote the story, which is considered one of his masterpieces, about a kind of bland, ineffectual man who goes through a very dull life, imagining greatness, having these flashes, these illusions of great things happening, always triggered by something in his environment, his immediate environment. And so it was a very famous short story at the time. It was turned into a movie in 1947 with Danny Kaye, which if you've ever seen that one, it's just kind of one of the screwball comedies of its time and doesn't really do too much. And then again in 2013, the new one that we just watched with Ben Stiller goes into deeper thematic elements in terms of trying to really show this hero's journey, show the transformation that is taking place as the journey takes place. And the movie itself in 2013 was really not very well received by critics and by even moviegoers, but it's been interesting to watch. Even the first time I saw it, it kind of went over my head and I wasn't too impressed by it. But the second time and the third time, it really started to take hold of me. It has become kind of a cult classic in that respect, whereas a group of people just loves this movie. As I was searching out clips and doing research on the internet, reading the comments, comment after comment about how this movie had changed people's lives, how it had brought them into a greater understanding of themselves and the motivation to be able to make changes. And so this movie starts with our title character, Walter Mitty, on his 42nd birthday. And the first scene is in his bland gray-blue apartment, and he's trying to decide whether to push the button on his computer that will send a wink, an eHarmony wink, to a woman that he has become attracted to, who is new at his place of business. And we find out later that he can't even fill out a profile on eHarmony because he's never been anywhere or done anything. He went to Phoenix once, he can't remember why. Oh, and he went to Nashville, but that was only the airport on the way to Phoenix. And so you can kind of tell in these first few opening scenes that we've got a guy here who has just fallen into the dullest sort of existence. Now, the backstory is that he was a very different person as a youngster and as a teenager. He was a skateboard prodigy. He had a mohawk. He created great mixes of music and had plans to go to Europe and do all these things. And then his father died when he was 17 years old. And that just took everything out of him. He was so close to his father. The grief, the sense of loss, but also the sense of responsibility that kicked in. Because without his father, his family was in very difficult financial situation, and he had to immediately get a job. And that sense of responsibility, that worker bee attitude from his late teens had carried him all the way to 42, and he never really developed any other parts of his life. He has no wife. He has no family. His main contacts, his main relationships are his mother and his sister. He's worked for 16 years at Life magazine, but as the negative assets manager. Now, it sounds negative because it's in the title, right? But what he does is he manages all the negatives that come in from the photojournalists around the world. He works down in the basement, basically in the dark, right? Just managing these photographs. And he does a great job, but you can imagine the kind of existence he's in. And his only relief are his fantasies. And they always tee off something that's happening right in the moment. And he imagines himself in these great situations. He imagines the life that he is not living. And he has one contact with a famous photojournalist. And this man is world-renowned as a photojournalist. And he relies on Mitty to get his photos in the right places and to do the things that need to be done to realize his vision as a photographer and an artist. And they have a bond. And so he lives, again, vicariously through Sean O'Connell, through this photographer, as he goes around the world and does all the crazy, Indiana Jones kind of stuff that he does. He's a very Indiana Jones kind of character. So he's attracted to this new coworker, but he's afraid to approach her. But he overhears that she's on eHarmony, so he goes on eHarmony just to try to meet her. And when he finally summons the courage to press that wink, it's a tech failure, and it's unable to perform that action. That leads him to needing to call tech support at eHarmony, and he befriends this tech support guy, who when he finds out what he's doing, he says, well, that's kind of unique. Why don't you just sort of humanly talk to her? And it's like, wow, what a concept, right? But what it does is it plants a seed. It doesn't happen right away. And as he gets to work that day, he finds out that Life magazine has been sold, and it's going to be downsized, and they don't exactly know what's going to happen, but then they find out they're ending the print publication for Life magazine. And that Sean O'Connell has sent in one picture that he says needs full consideration for the cover. It's his best work ever. It's the quintessence of Life, and it's -25, and it's not in the roll. And he doesn't know where it is. And that sets everything up for this journey that he's going to be taking in the movie. He has to find -25. He has to somehow connect with this woman. And so he remembers what the eHarmony guy had said, and he actually goes to her because she works in accounts payable and asks if she can connect him to Sean O'Connell. Where do you send the checks? Well, it's hard with him because it could be here, it could be there. He moves around a lot. And then they find out it could be Princeton. Oh, good, train ride. Or it could be Greenland. Can't take a train there. Well, it turns out that it is Greenland. And that's where the hero's journey begins. He has a choice. Will he get on a plane and go to Greenland and try to find Sean so he can find -25? Or is he going to remain in his familiar, dull world? That's it. That's the hero's journey. Always starts with the hero, the heroine in their familiar place, in their dull existence. But then there's some sort of wounding. There's some sort of impetus that is a call to the next world. It's a call to a place that they don't understand. All the rules are changed. And there's a task that is given. There are companions and teachers that show up and give tools and give information that they need. And when and if they return, make the complete circuit after completing their tasks, they come back to the world that they knew. But they're not the same person anymore. They are changed. They bring back a boon. They bring back something to the community that they didn't have to offer before because they've discovered something within themselves. These heroes' journeys are cycles within cycle. Of course, the largest one is the call of the child into the world of the adult. What is a hero's journey there for in the first place? Why is it the story we keep telling ourselves over and over and over again? Because it is the journey that we take. What happens when the child moves into the world of the adult, not understanding how that world works, having to deal with all the complex emotions and all the responsibilities and tasks of adult life? That transition is the hero's journey, and we take it from birth until death. But there are cycles within cycles. Every time we experience a trauma, every time we experience a loss, every time our world as we knew it is suddenly laid bare, taken away from us, we can accept the call if we would like and go through the journey again, or we can try to retreat back into our dull world, which really doesn't exist anymore. Now in MIDI, it's kind of a cartoonish show in many ways. The characters are overblown, but that's on purpose. That's part of the stylistic choices of the comedy that it is. And of course, it's neatly wrapped up in 2 hours, and he gets the girl, and everything happens, right? And life we know is not like that. But even though it's artificially created, it still points to the hope that we have as human beings. It points to the truth that each one of us is capable of this fundamental change. Now, how many times have you heard people say, people don't change, you know? Usually that's women talking about men. People don't change. They don't change. And often they don't. And the older we get, the harder it is for us to change, and the less likely that we actually will change. Oftentimes that's the case. Change is really hard, and the deeper it goes, the harder it is. Especially when we're dealing with unconscious beliefs, those core beliefs, dealing with those unconscious programs that have been running since childhood. What we believe when we were hurt as children before we could really process things cognitively. That's what we're trying to change. So how hard is it when you don't have a direct connection? You don't even consciously know what it is you're up against. This is what Jesus is talking about when he talks about the narrow way and the constricted gate that leads to truth, leads to life. He's making the same point. He's not talking about heaven and hell. He's talking about how hard it is to go this way and actually make it to this fundamental change that shows us the way the world really works. But the truth remains that a few of us do. It's not nobody does this. It's a few of us do this. And the truth also is that any one of us can be one of those few. No one is excluded from the possibility that we can be the ones. It's a question of how badly do you want it? Or how badly do you feel you need it? And what woundings have you experienced? What life events have occurred to conspire to force a decision in you, to bring you right to the point of decision? And maybe you don't answer the call repeatedly and you move back into your dull world. But those calls will keep coming. And any one of us at any time can answer that call, start our journey, and move into another place. And if we can become aware of the characteristics of how personal change really works, that can also help us overcome. And that's what I basically wanted to talk about now that you got a sense of what the movie was and why we're using it as a backdrop. There are many commentaries about this movie, Walter Mitty, and you can go online and you can find them. I found a video essay that I thought was especially good, and it's called Walter Mitty and the Process of Fundamental Change. And several of you have asked for the link, and I can send that out if you would like. And what this essay does is break down the plot points in the movie and ties them to the truths about this fundamental personal change, how it works in our lives, and what the characteristics are, so that we can see them as they're coming up in our lives. That's the key. If we're not aware in real time as the choice is about to be made or the moment of choice has come, then we're not going to be able to bring these principles to bear. We're not going to be able to realize that there is even a choice to be made. Now you may be thinking, hey, it's just a movie, and kind of a silly one at times, yet. But the truth is that stories are with us, and we tell ourselves stories and have always told ourselves stories because their relevance to us is that they distill down patterns of meaning. The good stories do. They take the meaning that we have gleaned as a race and as a people, and they distill them down into a story that we can experience, and that can then guide us to new behavior. And this is what stories always do, whether the stories of the Bible that we treasure, or whether it's poetry, or whether it's literature, or whether it's movies. It doesn't matter. The stories are what are showing us these truths, these points along the way. It makes us aware in ways that we weren't before. And obviously it can motivate us and it can inspire us to try something new. Now, this essay pointed to 3 essential characteristics of fundamental change. And the first one is that big, spectacular adventures, like the one Walter Mitty takes, or maybe the ones that you have taken in your own life, are not really responsible for this change that we're talking about. Instead of the big, spectacular journeys, it's the simple act, the most simple choices that we make in a new direction, a different direction, but still very simple, very subtle, that puts a domino effect in motion. When Mitty presses the enter key for that wink, it sets a domino effect in motion. Since it fails, he needs to talk to the tech support. The tech support makes a suggestion to him. Life is closing. -25 is missing. He needs help in order to be able to try to find where this negative is. And so he asks for help of the woman that he's trying to reach in the first place. And she is taking a mystery novel course. And so she knows how clues are assembled and disassembled in the sense of telling the story. And so she is able to help him assemble the clues in such a way that they realize that the last place the photographer was in Greenland. And this hunt for -25, starting in Greenland, becomes the grand adventure that eventually exceeds his imaginary life. His real life exceeds his imaginary life, but is initiated by one small, simple decision. It took everything in him to press that button at that moment, but it was something that he could do. And that's the way of it. I have a story that I've told you, I think, before, some of you at least, and it's just like this. And this is the whole reason that all of us are sitting here right now having this conversation. Well, it's not really a conversation. I'm talking, you're listening. But the whole reason we're sitting here is that some 25 plus years ago, maybe it's getting to be 30 years ago, I was invited to go hear a guitar player play on a Tuesday night in a church, standing across the counter of a pro audio shop in Costa Mesa. Now, I am one of the world's great introverts, and so saying yes to something like that is not in my nature, right? And if someone says, I play guitar and come and hear me play, 9 times out of 10, they're not that great. So why would I want to go against my nature and go sit and listen to someone play guitar on a Tuesday night at a church? And for some reason I said yes. And he turned out to be a fabulous guitar player. And the person who was singing with him was Lisa Jones, who ended up being our first worship leader for 8 years of our first 5 or 8 years here at The Effect. And the next time I was in the shop, he said, why don't you sit in with us? And again, I have no idea why I said yes, but I did. And that turned into 6 years playing at that church. And then I come to realize that was a recovery gathering. That was my first initiation into recovery. And I fell in love with recovery. It was more church than church. Recovery has defined the last 25 years of my life. It's what The Effect started as, was a recovery ministry. Because I said yes to go listen to someone play guitar on a Tuesday night in a church. Small decisions, something that was in a different direction, something I had to push through the resistance for, but it was something that I could do. If you had told me you're going to be enter in recovery treatment and you're going to start a church, that's overwhelming. I can't do that. But can I go hear someone play guitar? Can I press enter and send a wink? Yes, that's something that I can do. Jesus tells us the same thing. Take a look at Matthew 13, starting at verse 31. What does he say here? Famous parable, right? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. And this is smaller than all the other seeds, but when it is full grown, it is larger than the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. And then one right after it, verse 33, he spoke another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 pecks of flour until it was all leavened. Both parables are talking about the smallest beginnings of things. Tiny little things, a tiny seed, a pinch of yeast into the dough, seemingly completely insignificant, but have huge results. It's like chaos theory, right? Small changes in input yield huge changes in output. Butterfly flaps its wings in Peking and it snows in New York City. This is the idea here. These tiny things that we choose to do change the trajectory just slightly. But going down that path takes us someplace we never even imagined if we will let it, if we will continue to move. Take a look at Mark 4, starting at verse 26. The kingdom of God is like a man who casts seed upon the soil, and he goes to bed at night and gets up by day, and the seed sprouts and grows. How? He himself does not know. The soil produces crops all by itself. First the blade, then the head, then the mature grain in the head. But when the crop permits, he immediately puts in the sickle because the harvest has come. What's the farmer doing? Showing up day by day. Maybe he doesn't feel like it every day. Tiny little things that he does that are completely invisible to everyone else. Nobody sees the farmer. Nobody sees the janitor. Nobody sees the server. Nobody sees these people that show up every day and do these tasks day in, day out. Maybe he has to push through. But if he keeps showing up doing these small, invisible things, something is happening that he does not know anything about. He has no idea what's happening underground when he plants that seed. And it's so important for us to see the metaphor here, the analogy here. We have no idea what's happening in our unconscious. We just keep showing up and planting the seeds. Stuff is happening down there that we know nothing of. And it happens while we're sleeping. But at a certain point, if we just do our part, everything changes. But it's all mystery. We don't understand it. It's all unknown to us. It's uncertain to us, right? Mysterious and uncertain. The simple step or choice that we're making is a step into the unknown. It is something we've not done before, and not done in this way. There's a resistance that we feel, but if we're willing to push through that into something different, things change. And there's no way around it. There's no other way you can do this. There's no kinder, gentler way. We'd like to think there is a way to stay in control, but Jesus says anyone who climbs over the wall of the sheepfold is a thief and a robber. The only legitimate path is through the gate. I am the gate. This is what he's trying to get through to us over and over again. There's no way around this need to just move into the unknown and uncertainty. You know, yesterday morning I awoke from a dream. One of those weird dreams. You know, you only remember the dreams that you wake up in. So I woke up out of this dream, and I was in a store like a Home Depot kind of store. It was something like that. And I was sort of observing this conversation between the customer and the associate with the vest, you know. And yet I was sort of the customer as well, that kind of weird juxtaposition. And the person was saying, I just don't know if I used the right kind of tape for this DIY thing in my house, and I don't know if I used the right tape. And the associates look at him and say, well, did it stick? Yeah. Well, then it was the right one. And then he said, you know what your problem is? He said, you measure the success in your life with, and I kind of leaned in that moment, and he said, certainty. You measure life's success as certainty, but there is no certainty. But if that's what we're after, then we're always running around second-guessing ourselves. We're always worrying. We're not breaking through even to the smallest step of just trying this piece of tape and see if it works. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you use the wrong kind of tape, then it's not going to stick for very long, right? Well, don't overthink my metaphor or my dream machine, okay? I understand. I just thought it was interesting the way my mind was working after watching Walter Mitty and thinking about this and waking up with a dream like that. It's pretty cool the way our minds work, our dreams work. A couple more. John 4. Take a look at this. Starting at verse 3. Jesus left Judea and went away again into Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. Actually, he didn't have to pass through Samaria, but he did pass through Samaria. If you look at a map of ancient Israel, it's Judea, and then just going north, it's Samaria, and north of that is Galilee, just stacked up like blocks. And so if you're going from Judea to Galilee, the straight way is through Samaria. A good Jew would not be caught dead in Samaria because them's half-breeds. You don't mess with those people. They would actually go 60 miles out of their way into the Jordan Valley, and then up around into Galilee just to avoid going into Syria. But Jesus just goes straight through because that's Jesus. He had to pass through Samaria, so he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, and near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, and Joseph's well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. Now they count hours from 6 a.m. from sunrise, so the 6th hour would be straight up noon. And there came a woman of Samaria to draw water. And Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Therefore, the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman?" For Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. And Jesus was breaking all sorts of protocol here. An upstanding Jewish man would not even speak to a woman in public, let alone even be in Samaria or speak to a Samaritan woman and ask for water from her hand into his. Do you know how many social barriers he's breaking there? It's crazy. And the thing that we also need to understand is that this is straight up noon, high noon, the 6th hour. What is she doing drawing water in the hottest part of the day? Nobody did that. The women would come out of the village early in the morning when it was still cool, and it was a big social event to all gather around the well and talk and have a good time and draw your water and go home, or you did it late at night, or you did it both, but they were social gatherings in the cool part of the day. And here comes this woman in the heat of the day to draw water and happens to meet Jesus there. She made that. Why did she make a decision like that? Well, we find out later that she's had 5 husbands, and the man that she's living with now is not her husband. She was not going to be someone who was in good standing with that village. She was going to be one of the big sinners. She was avoiding the social gathering. Her shame was keeping her from all of that connection with her community. And so she came at the hottest part of the day when it would be empty over there and did her thing. So she makes that decision. And then she meets this Jewish man at the well who asks her for a drink. She had to decide to engage. She had to decide to speak with him, eventually to give him a drink and to have a conversation that led to her being changed enough and excited enough about what she was hearing to run back to the village, wake everybody up out of the siesta, and say, "You've got to meet this prophet I just met." And they all follow her back. And the scripture tells us that many people were changed that day. One small decision leading to huge change. And then at Matthew 8, starting at verse 5, when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him. Now, this is a Roman military official. He would be in charge of 100 men, a centurion. Came to him, imploring him and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented." Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him." Here's Jesus again talking to a Roman officer. Really? But the centurion said, "Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." And now when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following, "Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. Can you imagine what his followers and the Jews were thinking when he said something like that? But let's think about the decision of the centurion. He's got this problem. He's got this servant that he loves, says something about him. He cares enough about his servant to actually make the decision to go out and ask for help, of all people, of a Jewish sage, a Jewish healer. But that one small decision into a new direction, into the unknown. And he does it in a way he understands, the chain of command, right? You don't need to go. You just need to say the word. The word is enough because he understands the chain of command. But he's stepping way out into the unknown. What kind of flack did he get from his fellow officers? How did the men under him look at him if they knew that he went to this Jewish sage? All of these things are in question, but that tiny decision to ask for help fundamentally changed so many lives. Now, if we want to make a change in our life, how do we do it? Knowing what we know about small decisions leading like dominoes to big changes. The first thing we got to do is figure out what change we want. What is it that you want to change? What is it you want to be? What is it that you want to do? And as hard as that may be, because most people, when you ask them, they don't know, but as hard as that may be, that's still the easy part. Because then what you need to do, once you've identified where you want to end up, what the goal is, then you want to work backward through the chain of events that would lead to that goal until you get to that first small step that you can do. Like I said, in the movie, the woman, Cheryl, is taking a mystery novel course. And she says the way you do it is that you start at the scene of the crime, and then you work backward through all the chain of events that got to the scene of the crime. And then you take each event and use it as a clue, and you scatter the clues throughout the book. And then people have to put the clues back together again and have it lead to the crime. Kind of the same thing we're doing here. What is the goal that you want to get to? Work backward. Identify all those events and critical points and choices that need to be made until you get to the first one. Something that is simple, something that you can do. Or maybe it's some behavior you want to stop. Maybe it's not something you want to do, it's something you want to stop doing. Well, then you need to do exactly the same thing. Find where the chain begins that leads to the undesired behavior, right? And then stop that, nip that in the bud. It's like what Jesus says. He says, you think you haven't murdered someone, you're safe. But I'm telling you, even if you have an angry thought in your head, you're already guilty. Why? Because the angry thought, event by event, escalation by escalation, is going to lead to physical violence. Nip it in the bud right there. That's something you can do. Deal with that thought before it becomes something huge, before the train leaves the station and you're just on it for the ride. So the example in the essay that is used is that you have a problem kind of obsessively scrolling on your phone, and before you know it, hours have gone by and you're scrolling, and you really want to stop that. And you say, I'm not going to do that tonight because I'm going to be staying up way too late and I'm going to be terrible in the morning. And then your phone does a little buzz on the nightstand and you just want to check the email. And then that leads you to this and leads you to that, and before you know it, an hour is gone. So what's the solution? How do you stop that compulsive behavior? Don't put the phone by the bed. Put the phone downstairs in the kitchen, plug it into the charger, because chances are, first of all, you're not going to know when it does that little buzz, right? And then chances you're going to get out of your warm bed and go all the way downstairs to get that phone are probably rare. Stop the small thing that's going to lead to the big thing. Find out what the small thing is so that you can do that, even if it's pushing through the resistance that will take you where you want to go. Second point, we don't make fundamental change alone. Big, huge point. It's always going to be in connection with somebody. Our companions, our teachers. Now, maybe that first small decision, pressing the enter button, the wink, that was alone. He did that alone. But it was his first step toward the connection that he was lacking. His life was lived in isolation. He made that first step toward connection. First of all to the tech support rep, and then to the woman that he had the attraction for, and then to find the photographer, and even the evil boss, who is the manager of the transition. All of them played a role in his development as he's going through his journey. Think about AA. What's the strength of AA? It's not even the 12 steps or the big book. It's the community. It is the fellowship. It is the people around you that are the power greater than yourself, the representatives for God's presence on earth. If you're trying to lose weight, how many people can really lose weight on their own, completely in isolation? It's usually in community that it really comes off, and then it actually stays off. It's in connection with people. In spiritual formation, it's the same way. That's why we have churches. That's why religion is still relevant, even though it's done badly so often. But it's the people around us that support us, that model for us what it looks like to live the kind of life we're trying to live, the accountability that happens between us, the discipline to the structure, all of this. This is what happens. These fundamental changes are made with others and not alone. And our first decision, no matter how small it is to step out into the unknown and step out into some form of connection, just like the Samaritan woman did, just like the centurion did. And the third point is that changing environments actually do change us. If we allow ourselves to become part of, to become one with the larger experience of this new landscape that we have moved into, this new world that we've moved into. Now, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, wherever you go, there you are, right? And that's true. If you do go to a new place, but continue to make the same choices and do the same things over and over again, that's absolutely true. But a change of landscape, a change of culture can force a decision on us to change as well, or not. It all depends on if we're willing. Do we see the change as traumatic and that we are victims of that trauma? Or do we see the change as an opportunity and we are students of that opportunity? It's all up to us. But the landscape itself can be a catalyst for our change. And if we're paying attention to life, we can start to see these very principles in action every single day. Now, often, most of us are too immersed in the trees to actually be able to see the forest. And it is true that a lot of these changes take years to unfold, and we can't see them except in retrospect. My story that I told you about, saying yes to go listen to someone play guitar, that took 15 years or more for me to realize the significance of that. All after my life had become defined in terms of career by recovery and by recovery ministry, and then to work backward through the chain of events. It's kind of like, how did we get here in this conversation? Go backward and find out, oh my gosh, I said yes to that. But it took years for me to understand that. And this is what happens to all of us. Sometimes we don't recognize the small decisions when they're upon us, but we can look back later. I wanted to read you just a few of these stories that people have written about small decisions that have become huge for them. I took a random part-time job out of desperation, making wooden snowboard and skateboard racks. 12 years later, I'm deeply embedded in the woodworking industry and found a career. I didn't see that coming. My desk job's internet filter stopped me from going to my favorite websites, but it didn't block boardgamegeek.com. So I ended up spending my downtime at work researching board games, game designers, and publishers. I read about a game but couldn't find a copy of it, so I put together a version of how I thought it might play. Later, I found out I was totally wrong about how that game worked, but I preferred my version of the game. Now I'm an award-winning board game designer. I accepted an invite to some dude's team for an online game. Now I live on the opposite side of the country with him, and we have 2 dogs and a Costco membership. I was checking out a new tea shop that opened up in my area. I became friends with the owner, and she told me about a coding boot camp. And less than a year later, I had a great new career. I was transferring to a new university, and I was in the office picking out my classes. I wanted to start learning Chinese because I thought it would be interesting to learn a new lettering system. Chinese was all full. So I sat there with my pen hovering between Japanese, which is kind of like Chinese, and French. Without a second thought, I checked off Japanese. I met my husband in that class, who was a science major, so I never would have had another class with him as an art major. Also, his best friend married one of my friends, and at their wedding, she hugged me and said, "Thank you for my husband." So that one little check mark on a form changed the lives of 4 people forever. I moved into an apartment, and somebody upstairs had their door open and was vacuuming her carpet and playing Stevie Wonder at full blast, so I went upstairs to complain. We've been married 43 years. My mom, who was afraid of dogs, said, "You need to meet a woman and get married, so I'm getting you a dog for Christmas." I met a woman at the dog park who helped me with puppy issues. We've been married for 10 plus years with 3 kids and 3 dogs, and Mom's plan worked like a charm. On a night out, I went to Burger King, and at the last second decided to get chicken nuggets with my burger instead of chips. Obviously, she's in England. I ate the burger but didn't feel like the nuggets by this point, so I asked the person opposite on me on the bus if he wanted them. My exact words, "Aye, lad, do you want me chicken nuggets?" And he said yes, and we got talking. And that was 16 years ago, and now we are married with a beautiful daughter. And then the comment right under that was, "I wish someone would give me some chicken nuggets." You know, we can only see the significance of some of these tiny decisions. You're going to check a course on a form, right? Only in retrospect, after we see the path that has unfolded. But here's the kicker. Here's the important thing. As awareness of the patterns start to build in our lives, all the ones that we're seeing in retrospect, we can become more intentional about the decisions that we're making today. The choices that we're making right now. We can see all of them as potentially significant. And we can be more present to them. We can be more curious about them. We can be grateful for them. We can even be amused by them while they're happening, even as they remain insignificant. And it will change the entire experience of our lives to be engaged in our moments to that extent as part of this larger story. If we can start saying yes, right, to new experiences and people, become curious about where these paths may lead, enjoy the uncertainty that is present as we push through resistance, the adventure of new territory that we're going to experience, and see what unfolds, and be part of that unfolding. In the movie, the motto of Life magazine is an overarching theme that appears over and over again in both graphics and also in text. And it's the theme of Mitty's whole journey. Now, as it turns out, the motto, as it was presented in the movie, is not actually the real motto of Life magazine, but it was derived from the founder. And I wanted to read you this because it's really interesting. Life magazine started out in 1883, but it was a different kind of magazine. And then in 1936, it was purchased by Henry Luce. And Henry Luce was the big publishing magnate, the publisher. He did Time, Life, Fortune, and Sports Illustrated, so he had a lot going on. In 1936, he only had Time. But that was enough. That was a huge magazine. And he acquired Life. He spent $92K in 1936. That is $2.2 million today, by the way, because he just wanted the name. He liked the name. And he was going to completely redo the magazine, turn it into something different, a photojournalist magazine. Had never really been done before. And so in planning this new weekly magazine, he circulated a confidential prospectus within his Time Inc. company, which described the vision that he had for this new magazine and what he viewed as its unique purpose. And he said that Life magazine was to be the first publication with a focus on photographs, photojournalism, telling stories with images rather than text, that would enable the American public to see life, to see the world, to eyewitness great events, to watch the faces of the poor and the gestures of the proud, to see strange things, machines, armies, multitudes, shadows in the jungle and on the moon, to see man's work, his paintings, towers, and discoveries, to see things thousands of miles away, things hidden behind walls and within rooms, things dangerous to come to see and take pleasure in the seeing, to see and be amazed, to see and be instructed. And out of all of that was distilled down, the motto of life was to see life and to see the world. Well, in the movie, they expanded on that. And the motto was to see the world, things dangerous to come to see behind walls, to draw closer, to find each other and to feel. That is the purpose of life. Think about those three elements that they pulled from the prospectus, right? To see the world, things dangerous to come to see behind walls. But think what they're signifying. To see the world, things dangerous to come to. That's about the risk that's going to be inherent in any participation with life. It's going to be dangerous. It's going to seem risky, but can we push through? Can we push through the resistance? To see behind walls, to start to build the awareness that gives us a kind of second sight, that allows us to see the task within the task, that allows us to see what's really at issue even as we're doing the mundane things of life. To draw closer, the interdependence that is inherent in human life, that we have to rely on each other. We have to draw closer, to find each other, the connection that is everything that we're here as human beings to do. And of course, to feel the empathy, the full engagement in life. That is the purpose of life. Can we begin to see in each moment that we live, the smallest decisions that we make, as the seeds of adventure, as the whole of the world in each uncertain step that we take? Can we start to make friends with uncertainty, make friends of uncertainty as the engine of that adventure? Without the uncertainty, there is no adventure. Can we start to say yes more than we say no? Can we start to love the dead ends of our decisions as much as the fruitful branches and see it all as part of the tapestry of our lives? If we can start to do that, then we'll start to realize that success in life is not measured with certainty. It's simply measured with participation. And that is the purpose of life. Let's pray. Father, thank you for creating this world and our lives exactly the way that you did. Even though we kick and scream and it seems so unfair and we don't understand the things that befall us, the burdens that we need to carry, the losses that we need to endure. But at the same time, somehow in that uncertainty, in that mystery, lies everything that you have for us. Help us to push through the difficulties. Help us to push through the resistance to get into that place of mystery so that we can experience your presence with us. Always strongest when we're feeling the weakest. Always. Help us to let go of the certainty that we gather over and over again to get to that place of vulnerability and dependence so that we know that you're with us and that everything is going to be all right and we can participate in the unfolding of our lives, however they do, whatever path we choose. Thank you for always being with us, Lord. Never let us forget. We can only love or do any of this because you did it first. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's all stand.